When people have on their LinkedIn things like, I'm a project manager and I'm a people person and I can work in these 5 different sectors and I can also do this and I'm also a Prince 2 and I'm also God knows what, you are basically making my life really difficult. Recruitment is unbelievably ageist. They will really struggle. I will go so far as to say too many factors outside of your control. You can't control the candidates that might be applying for jobs in addition to you, can't control the market, you can't control the hiring manager. The only thing that you can always control is...
What are the top 5 pieces of advice you have for aging candidates in navigating this job market? Lucy Standing from Brave Stars.
Your age is your biggest asset.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Open to Work podcast. I'm your host, Matthew, again here to support you in navigating this really challenging job market, bringing you expert content from folks who are experts in what they do in relation to recruiting, diversity, inclusion, and people leadership, and hopefully giving you really good and sound advice in navigating this really challenging and tricky job market. As we are in the midst of our diversity and inclusion series, I'm super excited to bring in Lucy Standing. Lucy is the founder of and co-founder of a not-for-profit called Brave Stars, which is supporting people as they get older and navigating their careers. And I think it's a really relevant, under-talked about topic that I can't wait to get into, and hopefully providing really important information for folks as they get older in their careers and navigating this job market. So Lucy, welcome to Open to Work.
It's very kind of you to invite me here, Matthew. Thank you.
So as we have a hard open here at the Open to Work podcast, and we don't start easy. We ask every single guest to introduce themselves through an interview question, which we are seeing asked by almost every company at every stage. And it's the simple and open-ended question of, so tell me about yourself.
Okay. I don't think that's a hard question. You know, a hard question might be work out the physics angles of some sort of bizarre shape or mathematical formula, but telling me about myself is pretty easy. I've got a good handle on that. I grew up in Hong Kong, so I spent the first 22 years of my life out in Asia. I moved to the UK to do my master's degree because my first job was headhunting. Awful. I hated it. The master's degree took me into... Not for everyone. It took me into becoming, I am now a chartered occupational psychologist. I loved my degree. My first job was running graduate recruitment for Chase Manhattan Bank. I then became a global head of recruitment for a strategy consulting firm. I really didn't like that job. I was pretty much bullied out of it. So I left there to take a salary pay cut of around 50% to go and join a very small boutique occupational psychology consultancy. And from there, once I started having children, decided actually mixing children and a consultancy lifestyle where you're on the road 4 days a week didn't really work. So I've really pretty much been in the non-profit space for about the last 15 years. So for around 10 years, I was vice chair for something called the Association for Business Psychology, which is a professional body helping make sure that the business psychology professionals out there are doing a good job. And then really for about the last 4 or 5 years, I've been focusing on Brave Starts.
Amazing. And I think the reason why sometimes this can be kind of a tricky question is because it's so open-ended and people are not very good at kind of talking about themselves. And especially as you get older through your career, which we'll talk about in a second, you have so much that you can talk about. And so how do you hit on the right moments and really position yourself in the right way to the person who's asking it? And this question that is really asked in almost every interview that we see, and it's not a great question, but it is one that sadly is still used by everyone. So let's talk a bit about Brave Starts. Why did you start or co-found Brave Starts?
When I was vice chair of the ABP, you get one of the main jobs that I used to do each year was run the annual conference. And there is so much in this space, whether it's looking at the future of digital, whether it's looking at artificial intelligence. There's so much that you can kind of see and understand about what is available in the market, what research has been done. And there is so much research looking at things like employee engagement, looking at things like selection and assessment, leadership development. When it comes to thinking about the aging population, which is probably one of the largest and most significant mega trends that we're looking at, there is an absolute dearth of evidence. You know, what is it that helps attract people as they get older into jobs? What is it that helps retain people when they're older in their jobs? And the research around all of this was really quite poor. I also feel a number of a number of interventions offered by companies lack inspiration and lack bravery. So I wanted to start and deliver something that right from the outset, the goals of which are about impact and about making a difference, which is why we're founded on nonprofit principles. The first 2 years of what we were doing, we were offering everybody that was kind of coming through our doors, we were supporting them, all our workshops, everything we do, we're doing it all for free, because we wanted to sort of build up the picture, develop the understanding. How are things working? How do we make improvements? We're now 4 or 5 years in, and, I can comfortably say that the things we are doing are making a difference. We're challenging a traditional model of coaching, which I believe is the slightly more lazy way of just sort of throwing money at a problem. I think we are proving, or starting to prove, that we can make real significant change happen for people, often by simply facilitating connections amongst each other. I think there's much less focus on the coach, as it were, but much more than just internalizing problems or getting people to think about things for themselves. Actually, let's get you to think about things for yourself, but actually, more importantly, let's help you think about things for other people. Because once you start getting your head out of your own problems and start channeling that into helping others, that's the sort of stuff that really starts to help people feel that sense of purpose that really at this stage in life, so many people feel they're missing.
I've gone through the kind of materials and the courses that you provide and support, and the way that you are, and like the methodology behind what you're supporting. And it's really incredible. It's super unique. There's not really anything that I've seen that's like as in depth as what you're providing. So we met at a dinner or a breakfast kind of a few months ago. And I think I was the youngest person in the room as director of TA. I'm also not working. And I think I can speak for kind of quite a lot of people who are listening to this, who are under the age of 45, saying, why do I need to care about this? Like, this generation, the generation before us, they've had their career, they've had their chance potentially, and I'm struggling to I don't have a job. Like, why should I care about this problem right now? Because I currently don't have a job, and you kind of had your chance. We are delighted to be sponsored by Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using Metaview across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with Metaview. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls.
I think I'd look at that in 2 different ways. I mean, the first thing I would say is you are also going to get older one day, Matthew. And when you're
whether
older,
I like it or not,
whether you like it or not. I mean, this isn't. I really actually don't see this as a diversity and inclusion thing. I see this in the same category that I see climate change. This is happening. The world is getting older. Companies may have a recruitment shortfall. They may have, digital technology changes that they're going to have to adapt to. There's all sorts of issues that companies are going to have to get their head around, and aging is one of them. Whether or not you're targeting younger people, older people, it doesn't really matter. This is one of those. Give me a reason why you shouldn't engage on this topic, because when anything happens, right, the rise of digital, the rise of AI, most companies that stick their head in the sand and say, I'm not going to do anything about this and I'm not going to engage on it, talk me through how that works out for people. Show me how that helped BlackBerry. Tell me how that helped Toys R Us, or, any of the organizations that didn't adapt to the changes that are absolutely happening. This is one of those things that's happening, whether you like it or not. We're all getting older.
Speaking to someone the other day, and they're a marketing professional by trade, and they've had their own agency, they've built it and scaled it successfully, and they're just looking for like another job in marketing, right? Like a marketing manager job. It's not anything crazy. It's just like a solid, good job, continuing the same level of experience. And they asked me a really open question, which is like, look, I think I'm going to get bias. I'm going to get ageism bias. Talk to me a bit about how potentially you engage with that as a candidate, and how to kind of best navigate that potential bias that you're going to be receiving and set yourself up for success. Do you have any tips for candidates in that same who are not career changers, they're just continuing on their same career path?
I do. I think I'm going to break this down into two pieces, if that's okay. The first piece
Yeah,
I'm going
cool.
to say is we do need to acknowledge that actually that individual is absolutely right. So recruitment is unbelievably ageist. They will really struggle. I will go so far as to say, if you are, in particular, if you're a white man in your 50s or 60s, you are screwed. Um, our evidence, certainly from, we put 400 people a year through our programs. We're following up with people 9-10 months down the line. And the evidence that we have is that less than 10% of people will get jobs through using a traditional application form. This is despite people being able to tick every single criteria. So you are, if anything, more than qualified. And people get that feedback. We're
Yeah,
sorry,
I
you're
bet.
overqualified. What the
Yeah.
hell does that mean? I mean, actually, if someone says to me, you're overqualified, I'm thinking, well, where's my contract? Because by definition, that means I can more than do the job. That is not a reason to reject me. That's a reason to hire me, especially if I'm willing to take. I mean, that means money in your pocket because you're getting value for free. So let's acknowledge, I think, first, the validation that I can offer people around saying this is an ageist market is probably the most helpful thing I can say. And the backup I'll put on that is because I'm seeing so many people not getting through processes, I'm asking questions. Why is that happening? And I contact the likes of Indeed, Reed, LinkedIn, your biggest, largest recruiters in the UK, and I'm asking the question, what proportion of people in their 50s and 60s get interviews versus people in their 20s? Right? You literally have millions of people clicking on your site every day applying for jobs. Tell me. And their answer is, we don't know because we don't collect the data. And I'm thinking, well, if you're not collecting the data, are you telling the companies that are paying you to advertise these jobs, are you telling them that they've got a massive ageist black hole here? And the answer is no. Right? There is zero interest or zero reason for them to feed any of that information back, but I'll take that £15,000 to advertise your job. Thank you very much. Doesn't matter who I'm harming. And there is a responsibility. If you're going to be recruiting on behalf of organizations in the UK, which doesn't age discriminate, neither should companies in the US age discriminate there. And yet you can't prove it because they are not collecting the data. And their excuse will say, if we ask the question, candidates will think we're being ageist.
And I think it's worth pointing out kind of the law here as well, and that both the equalities are kind of an equivalent act in the UK and the US, and in most countries around the world do qualify age as a protected characteristic.
Yes.
But I think that the reality on how this is implemented is very different, and I think that goes for kind of all types of protected characteristics. And we were talking to another diversity inclusion kind of person yesterday, and they were saying kind of very similar things. And the reality is that even if you are protected, people are nervous and have their pre-existing conscious biases that will prevent people from getting into this job market, and that is an immediate barrier for historically marginalized groups where people don't feel like they have the language or the comfort, or they have pre-existing perspectives on like whether or not someone older will have a good understanding of technology or how much support they'll need relative to other people in the business. And these are all things that you'll be kind of challenged against. So the data that you've indicated there is that job applications are a really low percentage success rate for people over the age of 45 in getting their next job. And so what are the other tactics then that you are recommending to candidates in navigating and finding their next opportunity?
So I guess the first thing is they are going to have to think about new ways of getting themselves into spaces where they have a chance to perform for people. So, for example, asking for things like job shadowing, asking to do things like work experience, internships, those sorts of things. I would even go so far as to say people are prepared to pay money for training courses. They're prepared to pay money for theory, but they're not really paying money for the practice yet. If I have someone come and shadow me for a day, they're quite frankly a pain in the butt. And the way that I would get around that, and the way that I do this with a number of people that come through our process, if they say to me, I'd quite like to shadow this job, I say, fine, but you're probably going to have to pay for that. Because the amount of time and energy for someone to sit down and explain to you the ins and the outs of everything that might be involved is considerable. So you're paying for it. I have a lot of people will say things to me like, because let's take the experienced people, right? The ones who want to carry on doing the jobs they're already doing, but they cannot get through the jobs market process because they can't get through job applications. Then in those sorts of scenarios, I'm thinking, well, you're going to have to take a much more proactive approach. Don't tell me you're valuable. Don't tell me that you are worth 100,000 or that you will. I cannot work for less than 80,000, because I'll sit back and I will probably say to them something along the lines of, well, talk me through how that's working for you right now, because I don't see you working. And if you've got the value you claim to have, why aren't you serving that value for the benefit of somebody else? And at least if you're throwing yourself into trying to solve somebody else's problem using your skills for some good, then actually you're going to have to, as I say, unless you're actually doing that, you will find yourself in a spiral of doing pointless job applications that will get you nowhere. I would much rather encourage people out of that type of mentality and into a mentality where they're thinking, how do I best serve other people with the skills I have? And we try and help people think about the problems and the places. So there's this concept called sweat equity, which is if you don't have money to invest, but you have skill, well, then fine. In the same way that an investor will think, how do I target the best companies? Which will be the best ones that will give me the largest return on my investment? We try and teach people to think like that, but from the point of view of their investment of their time and skill. So which is an organization that might have a brilliant tech person in place? Like, let's say we take a talent manager, for example. Okay, which is an organization that has or is already growing, is likely to carry on growing, has already got good tech, good legal, but maybe they are struggling to grow at scale. Is that an organization that you can join? Maybe you're not charging your time, but maybe what you're saying is allow myself the opportunity to prove myself. And if I prove myself, then if I achieve X, Y, and Z, then in 3 months' time, I'm going to want some payment for that. And there is that type of mentality. It's a much more entrepreneurial mentality, but it's also a much more constructive mentality. And it's not exploitative, provided you're learning. So as long as you are earning something in return, whether it's a title, whether it's some sort of experience on your CV, whether it's exposure to a sector you want to get exposure to, that's the type of thinking that we need people to start adopting. Because, as I say, to continue with what people have already been traditionally doing is going to make people feel uncomfortable. Well, it's not going to serve them.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I don't. My mind is kind of quite conflicted listening to you, right? Because I think in my brain I've got what I think should be happening, right, and that we shouldn't have to have a scenario where people essentially are trying to offer their work for free, and
I agree with you.
I've done that through my job search, and I'm still I feel like I get quote unquote exploited oftentimes from my time and advice as someone who's not in work right now, and that's I think a systemic problem that exists, that people are trying to exploit people who knowledge and advice when they're not in work, as in position of an interview or a case study or whatever. And I think there's a systemic problem with that. And so kind of part of me saying, no, we need to stand up and say, let's not do that because that will perpetuate a bad system. But the other part of me is thinking, well, what's the reality that we're actually in right now? And what we need to face up to what's happening and try and look after ourselves here a little bit and understand that that might be a bit uncomfortable, and that kind of conflicts with what I want to be happening in the market. But in reality, it's the best route to potentially getting you into a position, or at least putting some time on your CV or something like that that's going to have an impact. Yeah. James and I used to talk quite a lot about it's okay to take a safety job. It's okay to take a job that isn't your forever job, especially in this market. And I think especially if you're pivoting your career, if you set really hard benchmarks what the minimum standards are and stuff like that, you are going to come into brick walls because no one is going to pay for your level of experience that you had in that previous career. You have to restart and rethink about the level of experience that you bring into a new career and potentially to start significantly lower down. And if you put a minimum salary or something like that, you've got to pay you for your food and family, and look at your hierarchy of needs and start and know what that money is, but then be open to being flexible on it as you need to.
You're absolutely right. And the strength around that is when we're talking about what we're talking about, there's too many factors outside of your control. You can't control the candidates that might be applying for jobs in addition to you. Can't control the market. You can't control, the hiring manager. The only thing that you can always control is your time, your energy, what you're putting that into. And so by putting it into things that you believe in, causes you want to support, developing skills you want to develop, then actually that's not exploitative. And as I say, there is a skill to identifying the organizations that aren't going to exploit you. There are questions you can ask. I believe in the power of someone who's worked for 30, 40 years to kind of understand some of that. And as I say, we do
Yeah, I
provide
think that's a
guidance
really
and sort
good
of
point,
support.
right? Like when you spoke about that
Mm.
example earlier, like use your experience and knowledge as a successful business leader to identify where that business is going to have problems, because you've been there, seen
Yes.
that, you've got the t-shirt, and you can practically
Yeah.
think, look, I think you're going to have these problems in a few months. Let me come in and help you solve those problems, and then
Mm.
see whether or not there's a longer term partnership in play.
I absolutely agree. I mean, one of our members, for example, at the moment, he was partner in a private equity firm, 23 years. He knows how to spot a company that's likely to be expanding and growing. So he's taken a role where he's going to be chair of, raising business in Europe for private equity arm of an executive search firm. And he will take a
Right.
portion of the business that he brings in. That's not a waste of his time and energy. Nobody's paying a penny right now, but is it likely to generate an income? Absolutely, it is.
Mm.
We had another example, another member who was head of UX at a really large corporate in the in the UK. She approached directly. So I've got a couple more tips for you. She approached directly a small but scaling startup business and said, your average age in your organization is 28. And as you get to about 150 people, you're not going to have the time and energy to invest in all of the problems that people are going to start having. You're not going to have the time. She said, yeah, I can do all your UX for you, but actually I can do that standing on my head with my arms tied behind my back. The other stuff I can also offer is going to be way more valuable to you, and here's why. And off she goes to demonstrate all the reasons why, all her understanding. Lo and behold, she has a job. So in particular, with these two examples, what you're talking about is people who are targeting companies likely to benefit from their skill, talking about the problems these companies are going to have in an educated manner so that people can see their value. Right? I'm not having to convince someone of my value, I'm demonstrating it. There is something, therefore, about targeting companies directly. When people have on their LinkedIn things like, I'm a project manager and I'm a people person and I can work in these 5 different sectors and I can also do this and I'm also a Prince 2 and I'm also God knows what. I'm sitting there looking at them going, you are basically making my life really difficult. Instead of really niching down into what you want to do, I've now
Yeah.
done, and talking about age, the other thing that we were saying was that people are uncomfortable, or you brought this up, Matthew. You were saying people don't want to necessarily, it's an icky conversation. People feel uncomfortable having it because there is anti-discrimination legislation protecting people. And that's actually the problem. So, what I'm saying to our members is your age is your biggest asset, or certainly one of them, but nobody is going to bring the topic up. Nobody's going to talk about it. If you're a mum who's already raised your children, tell people that. Say, when you're approaching people directly, there's nothing wrong with saying, now that I'm in my 50s and my children are all independent and they've left home, I now have way more time and energy to throw into this job than I would have done in my 30s. That's great. It's an anxiety someone's going to be having. You're talking about it. You're bringing your age to the conversation because they aren't going to, right? They are too scared to bring these topics up. So I say it's up to my members, it's up to the people we worked with to identify how their age is valuable, but make it clear to people how that's actually going to help their business and bring it to the table.
One of my most frustrating LinkedIn interactions is when I get random messages from people asking me to connect them to jobs. And I'm like, you haven't taken the kind of the basic courtesy of looking at my profile and what
Yes.
I'm doing at the moment in my life, then why would I respond to you? And I really have like very little hope for you. And because if you have to target your audience and who you're going to speak to, and like you also only get 30 LinkedIn messages or whatever a week, and so like you're going to use one of them on a random message to someone who definitely can't help you.
Yeah.
Like you have to have focus, and you have to know and provide value to the person who you're reaching out to. Like go and read How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Like this is a basic of like how to navigate networking and the job market really as someone who's not going to go by the job application route. These are basics.
These
And
are
you see insane amount of people not doing that.
I completely agree. So that's why I think, we have to accept, yes, recruitment market's broken. Yes, organizations aren't thinking innovatively. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of problems out there, acknowledged, right? But that individual has still got so much power, so much ability to put some good into the world. And I think there's still possibly too much of a mindset of navel gazing. Let me go and speak one-on-one to a coach. Let me help me. And I want to turn that on its head a bit and go, no, 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 no. It's not about you. It's about who you can help. It's about how you support and make a difference to the world. And when you start focusing much more on how you help other people's problems, your purpose is going to start to become clearer to you much more clearly, much more quickly.
What are the top 5 pieces of advice you have for aging candidates in navigating this job market? Lucy Standing from Brave Stars.
Okay, number 1, don't use jobs boards unless they are targeting specifically people over the age of 50, i.e. places like Working Wise or 55 Redefined. Number 2, start to think differently. So stop thinking about what you can get, start thinking about what you can give. Number 3, target companies directly. The percentage swing on that is about 24% because the number of organizations that put jobs on their own jobs boards is about 47 versus putting things out publicly is about 23%. So you increase your chances by 24% just by going to companies directly. Number 4, think about the age of the person you are sending your CV or you are sending your time or you're spending your time and energy targeting. Next, make your LinkedIn and make your focus of your activity very targeted. There is no point being a jack of all trades and a master of none. You are going to have to niche in a bit. People are going to have to understand what you're about, because if I want to check you out, I want the reassurance that what you're saying online publicly echoes and chimes with what you're writing to me about. If that means you write to one person a day instead of 30, then that is a win in my book. It gives you more time to help other people. The last thing is organize and target your activity at a consumer base or companies serving an older consumer base.
This advice is not limited to one age group. This advice is good advice for all peoples who are thinking about they're applying for jobs and navigating this job market, regardless of your age or background. And I think that one of the themes that came out of the conversation with Toby the other day in the previous episode is that inclusion is a net everyone benefit and elevate problem, not just a one specific group problem. And I think all of these, if you can use all of these skills and all of these approaches, will, as a combination, can help in finding your next opportunity. Awesome. I've loved this. I've personally learned so much. We finish every episode with a question that was left for you by the previous person. The previous person offered me 2, and I'm going to go with the other one just to put you on the spot a bit. If you were to advise your 18-year-old self in pursuing a career that you love, what advice would you give them?
I'd start by saying, I don't want you to start by pursuing a career that you love. I think it's a realistic end point. I don't think it's a very good starting one. You know, whatever job I've always started, you usually the feelings that you experience are doubt, anxiety, and trepidation. You don't know the culture of the organization. You haven't established your network or friendships yet. When people associate loving their job, one of the most significant predictors of that is time. So once people have been there for a fairly significant amount of time, actually, that's when they start to love their work. And it's because love is the reward you get with effort. So you get out what you put in. I will love my job. I love my job now because I know I've got this to look forward to today. I've got a conference on nudge stock to look forward to tomorrow. I've got conversations with people on Monday and Tuesday. I've got workshops to run that I know I'm going to enjoy. But that has been the result of time, energy, and effort and understanding what works. And because I know I'm adding value, that's when I know I enjoy what I'm doing. So it's start off with, what are your skills? What is the value you can best add to other people? Focus on that first, and love will come down the line.
I really love that answer. And I think because it speaks to something that I firmly believe, which is that, like, I think we should be speaking against this narrative of love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. I think it's actually quite a toxic narrative.
It's really toxic. Or follow your passion. Also, equally toxic.
And you, like, I like being good. I like being good at things. Like, that's kind of what I enjoy. To your point, like, I've learned to love recruiting because I've got good at it over time, and I love being really good at what I do. And that's what gives me my passion in lots of respects. And now I can, like, help people and stuff like that, which has also kind of come down the track of being better at what I do and having more knowledge. But I see so many people out there who are limited in their careers right now because, and like not moving forward because they're like, well, I don't love this. I don't like this. I'm like, well, just go do something, because if you go do something, you'll find your own ways that you can fall in love with it. My wife is like absolutely amazing at thinking like this. You know, she finds the joy in the minutia on anything that she does, and I have lots of envy for that. But I think I see so many people out there who don't do anything as a result of trying to find the thing that they love, and as a result, they stand still and do nothing. What an incredible way to end this episode. I've like individually learned so much. I've loved the conversation. I've really enjoyed every time I've met you, Lucy, and this is no exception. As a reminder, like, go and check out Brave Starts. Like, it's a truly unique NFP. If you have a business and you're a recruiting person, you work in the recruiting industry and you want to learn more about everything that Lucy's talked about today as well, please reach out to her. I think LinkedIn and Brave Starts, are they the best places to find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. And I mean, definitely our website. My email is on there. My mobile number is on there. But, you know, I make myself
almost too reachable.
Accessible. Yeah, I do make myself accessible.
Yeah. And I know that, you know, I'll be kind of sending this to people in the industry and kind of highlighting this, because I think it is an issue that I personally believe is going to impact all of us and is impacting businesses in the years to come, and I think is under talked about. So I'm a big supporter of everything that we're doing, and here you're doing here at Brave Starts, and you'll have my full support.
Thank you. And by the way, Matthew, not many people give us a spotlight. So, you know, I really am grateful for you giving us the time to do this. And you've engaged in it really openly and with a lot of curiosity, which is fabulous.
My pleasure. And I think, you know, that's what we're about here, I think, in the Open to Work podcast, right? We want to produce content that is genuinely helpful from genuine industry leaders, that's backed by data, that can help move the conversation forward and help candidates. You know, not a lot of content is built for aging population candidates, and as a result, they're filling the void with misinformation. And I think that, you know, as we've said, there's so much to take away here that is going to genuinely help people of all ages, of all backgrounds, in navigating this particularly tricky job market. You know, it's been absolutely spot on, I think, what we're trying to do to help. And so if you've listened to this podcast and you feel like it resonates with you in your career, and you think you have friends out there that can get value from listening to this episode, please share us. Like and share. It's like, really, that's how we know that you're here and you're listening and you're enjoying the content. And we're going to continue to create it if we continue to help. And write into us at opentoworkpod@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach us. And you can obviously find me at Matthew Parker on LinkedIn, and you can follow us on TikTok on Open to Work Pod. So thanks so much, everyone. Lucy, thank you again so much, and look forward to our next chat. And until next time, Open to Work, we'll see you then.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew.